Hello, I'm User Friendly's assistant, and here's what we're going to figure out how to do in this video. So I have just a couple of MIDI notes here, and nothing is going to happen when I press play. Once I draw this chord in, you can hear it changing. If I delete them, it'll stay there. And then I can draw in different chords and other instruments. So this takes a lot to set up. There's quite a few different steps involved setting something like this up. So I wanted to start by just kind of talking briefly about why you would do something like this. Kind of main practical reason would be that you can play it on drum pads like this. So now that chord is latched. Now that chord is latched. Now that chord is latched. So I can play these. Another thing is it's locked to a scale. So if I change the scale and change the key, it stays in key. So now you can sort of change this stuff around. The other reason outside of that kind of practical reason is this is something I've been trying to work out in my head for quite a while on, how I can do this. You end up learning a lot, not just from figuring out, what things do work, but the things that don't work are also really important. Just one quick example is the chord switching. So let me find a chord here. These are the different chords. So these are what we're going to select. One of the things I tried was just enabling and disabling these, so assigning these buttons to a macro and using the map that we're going to make later to turn these on and off. When I did that, every once in a while, for some reason, one of the chords would end up getting stuck letting a note through. Other times it wouldn't. And it just it wasn't entirely predictable. So then I was thinking, well, maybe I'll do what I do with the gamepad and just mute and unmute these different channels. One of the problems with doing that is every once in a while, they'll just stop playing. So you have to delete the instrument and bring it back in, with Command Z or whatever, to get it to start playing again. So that led me to doing what I'm doing here, which is muting and unmuting just a pitch. So, and again, I'll kind of explain how all this works in a minute, but I just wanted to kind of show these couple weird things that I ended up learning along the way. And now I know of a good way to do it. Because this is such a weird thing to do, it's kind of hard to get in touch with Ableton or somebody and say, why doesn't this work? Well, you're using it in such a weird way that it's kind of hard to even say why it does or doesn't work. But now I know of a way that it will work. These different cells up here, they're selecting chords, but you can sort of assign it to whatever you want. You could have it turn effects on and off. You could have it turn arpeggiators on and off. And, you could have loads of different chords, assuming that your computer can sort of handle all this. With all that out of the way, I'm going to open a new session and we're going to sort of set this up from scratch so you can sort of see how it works. The first thing we need is an instrument to play. I'm going to bring Meld in and then add a chord. So if you don't know the chord, if I play this, That's just the note. And then I'm going to shift these. Now we have a chord. I'm going to turn scale awareness on. So now we have our chord. I'm going to group this and then duplicate it. I'm going to put a couple of pitches in here. Come on. Actually, I can just duplicate it. That's way easier. All right. The second one, I'm going to turn scale awareness on. This is what we're going to use to sort of shift the chord around. So for example, that's our first chord. And this is going to be our second chord. Now we have two chords. The reason we have this pitch is because of how we're going to go about selecting these chords. So I'm going to consolidate both of these down to particular notes. All right. The way the chord object works is it's going to build this chord off of whatever the incoming note is. And I want to start all the notes off of C. Since we're going to be selecting with C sharp, that would mean that it's going to be building the chord off of this. The scale awareness, that'll help fix it sometimes, but depending on the note that you're using, it can kind of introduce a little bit of unpredictability. So this pitch, I'm just shifting it back down to C. So now we're using these notes to select, but the note that's coming through is still going to be the same. And this does seem a little bit cumbersome, but the reason for it is the stuff I was talking about at the beginning of the video, where if you just would kind of turn these on and off, there would be issues that would happen. Same if you just were to sort of mute these or solo them. So to select these two, we're going to bring another pitch in. So I'm just shifting this note up by one, and we're getting the two different chords. So now I'm going to group this, duplicate it, and shift this up one. The last thing we need is a note echo. And we're not actually going to be echoing the note. This is just to delay the note. So this is kind of a useful thing to know in general. And one of those kind of random things that I was talking about of stuff you'll sort of figure out along the way is that you can use note echo as a note delay. So I want to say that 33 milliseconds was the minimum at which this would work. And you can't really notice it when you play it. So we don't need to do any key selection here because we're just going to be muting and unmuting these. So now we're going to get to the main chunk of what this video is sort of how to go about selecting those. Drum Rack isn't really that great at sort of sending MIDI around to different channels and stuff. It's kind of closed off in the way that it works. So if you were to do like an expression control with key tracking or something like that, there's not really a good way to sort of send different values and then map everything to one particular spot. This is why I got to what I've gotten to, which is doing an operator. And where is it? Note length. So I'm going to latch this on. So just so we can sort of see what's happening, I'm going to play this. Now it's just stuck on indefinitely until latch is turned off. After the operator, I'm going to do an envelope follower, turn that to remote, turn the gain up, basically to the max. And then this is just going to be for a control. So we don't actually need to hear this. So that's what the utility for is, to turn it down. So now if I play this, you can see we have a high voltage. And if I stop it, we now have a low voltage. So the shape of the envelope coming out of the operator is going to be important. You saw that there was that tail there. So when I stop this, there's that sort of dip off. We don't want that. We just want it to be a straight gate. So with this release turned down to 0, we play it now, turn latch on. We play it, we have a high gate, and we have a low gate. All right, so that's all we really need to do here. I do think, I can't remember what the exact reason was, the issue that I ran into. But again, I think a sort of delay here might be helpful. The reason for it, all these sort of delays, is because if you trigger these two notes at the exact same time, it may not be enough time for the sort of modulation to get to where it needs to go. It's just giving, your machine a little bit more time to sort of work out what to do. So that should be all we need for this. So I'm just going to close all these. Now I'm going to duplicate this 4 times. And then this is the main part here, or rather the most important part that sort of ties this all together, is to select all of these and put them into one group. So a choke group. So now only one of these can play at a time. So if this one's playing right now, you can see the gate is high. If I play a different one, it's going to go low. If you were to use expression control or some sort of MIDI, the choke doesn't really listen to MIDI. So if you had, like right now, this note length here, this latch, it's still kind of on in a way. Like it's not, the way the choke works, I'm pretty sure it's based off of audio. So that's kind of the reason for using the operator with the envelope follower, is because of this choking thing here. Actually, let me rename these for us just so we know what's going on. So now that we have all these named, I'm just going to go through and map each one of these to a macro. So now we have a latch that we can sort of use for whatever we want. So if I map this to macro 1 and this to macro 2, same thing here. Pretty sure that's all we need. It should work now. Let's find out. So nothing should happen when I play these. And then if I draw the chord in, it's a latch. All right. So from there, let's do a couple more chords. So I'm just going to, these are just for selection. So the note doesn't really matter. I'm just going to shift this one up 2 steps and this one up 3 steps. Now I'm going to duplicate these and just shift these up. And then come back here, assign this and this, 3 and 4. So now I can just draw in 3. So we're playing this 3rd chord right here. It was probably fine where it was. Oh, that's nice. So let's see. This last one. All of this is pretty much done now. So now we don't really need to do a whole lot with this unless we want to do a bass note. And this is one of the cool things about doing it in Drum Rack is all of this setup that we've done, it's now just going to stay where it is. And since everything coming out of the Drum Rack, the MIDI notes, it's always going to be the same note. It doesn't really matter where we put it. This is just the notes that are coming in from your drum pad or your keyboard or whatever, are just going to be selecting these different things. So I'm going to copy this and put it on this track down here. And most likely, depending on the sort of chords you've built and things like that, to get the bass note, all you should have to do is just delete these chords. And now we should have a corresponding bass note. We just shift this down. Yeah. And then we could do another one here. And everything is all mapped. So now you're just kind of going through and changing different small things about it. So for example, here on this second chord, all I'm going to do is go through and invert each one of them. So I'm just going to shift the first note. I think that's an inversion or whatever the music theory thing is that's called. I'm shifting what would actually be the second note. Actually, that's worth mentioning here. That's an important point. If you don't know, this is the shift 1 is not the first note of the chord. It's the second note. So the first note that comes through, that's always going to be the first note of the chord. This is the second, third, and then this is going to be the fourth note of the chord. Does that make sense? So really we're shifting the second note of the chord up. If we wanted to shift the first note of the chord up, we would shift this up, but then these top two, whatever they are, we would want to shift those down an octave. Does that make sense? Whatever. So now that I have that, and then say we did one more, and we could do an arpeggiator. Something else worth noting here. If I'm holding this note down and then switch to a different chord, it's going to stop that note, even for the arpeggiator. Or this one's the arpeggiator. Because of how we're selecting the chord here. So when you hit those different notes, it's going to stop. One thing you can do, if you want it to sort of hold down, is you can put an arpeggiator before everything. So I'm going to drag this over to here. And I'm going to turn this off. So now it's just going to be playing a chord over and over again. So you can't do the sort of like actual arpeggiated thing. For the most part, that doesn't really matter, because if you're sort of playing it on drum pads, it ends up sort of naturally working out. You don't really need to worry about it that much. And if you're drawing in notes, then it really doesn't matter, because you can just sort of do the change exactly where you want it. So I'm going to leave this arpeggiator here. From there, you kind of can do whatever you want. So like, I would probably take all this. So this is the bass note here. Take all of this stuff group it. And then add a kick below the bass. So now we have a kick and a bass playing at the same time. And then your snare and things like that. The other thing is you have all of these other assignable things here. So say you wanted some particular thing to happen on just the first chord, you could still map this to whatever particular thing you wanted in here. So like that, for example. Yeah, that's sort of the main setup for all of this. From there, it's just finding interesting things to do with it. You know, you could do different melodies or groups of different notes and things like that and sort of select them however you want. But yeah, I'm going to leave this one the way it is with this sort of initial setup like this. And I'll upload this to Patreon so you can sort of continue with this however you wanted and include it with the main sort of full one that was at the beginning of the video. So you could sort of play with that, see what it feels like, then come in here, kind of take a little bit more of a deep dive into it. And then from there, if you wanted, you could make one of these things from scratch and sort of design your own chords and stuff like that. One more note would be kind of a reminder about this part of it here. So this pitch and this pitch, they don't have anything to do with the scale or the notes that are being played. This is purely selection. The notes that matter start here. So this is the two that you would want the scale awareness on if you wanted to use that. So like right now it's in C major. We could switch it to minor, G, or E, Mixolydian. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you found this helpful. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. All right. Thanks.